So let's jump into the questions. As I mentioned, we're going to get into the pre-submitted questions first. And the first one that came up is with regards to a student that's gone through the data collection process, gone through the analysis process, and they're now in the process of writing up their research findings. And their question is, when it comes to presenting my research findings, how do I choose what to focus on and what to cut? There's so much to say. I've got so many insights from my data. How do I narrow my focus? How do I decide what goes into the research findings and what gets left out? David, how can they approach this?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and I've probably said it in almost every Q&A that we've done, is focus on your research questions first. You want to know what it is that you've asked and what are the findings that specifically answer those research questions. That's going to be your focus for the results chapter. There's a ton of data that you've collected. You've got insights coming out of every niche that you can find, but really the main goal is to focus on really presenting those answers to your research questions. So that's the first step. And the second thing you want to do is identify what's ancillary or not related to the research question. That's going to be what you can cut. If you feel that there are important and valid findings, put them in a sort of maybe bin, and then you can bring that in once you've covered the main answers to your research question, and then you can tackle those if you've got word count or space to spare. The other thing that you can do is for findings that aren't necessarily directly related to answering the research questions, you can definitely put those into your appendices as well, because that's a really good way of showing the depth of work that you've done and what you've engaged with, while not diluting the message that you're trying to present. Similar to the first point is also think about what is the story you want to tell with your research? What is the message you want to convey? And you want to be presenting the findings that connect with that message. And that's going to help you identify what to specifically focus on. Moving beyond that, you also want to make good use of figures and tables, ways of summarizing data to sort of take a lot of information and make it condensed and concise. Importantly, you do need to, in the write-up, engage with all the findings that you present in your tables, but that allows you to get a lot more data into your findings chapter. And in some cases, check with your institution. Those tables and figures don't count towards your word count. And so that's another way of sort of sliding in a little bit more detail if you want as well. And then probably the last point that I'll make is really discuss your findings with peers, with your supervisor, if you've got that kind of a relationship, and work with them to identify what really gels with the story, what really contributes to the research question. Nothing beats getting a second opinion on your research to identify what's relevant, what's appropriate. You can look at peer support groups, coaching like Grad Coach, or you can just talk to your supervisor or even a senior researcher in your department or research group. They're going to really help you to identify what is that key story that you want to tell. I'm not sure if you've got anything else you want to add there, Derek. I'll try to minimize throwing the mic to you.
Yeah, I think your first point is probably the one that I'll just echo again, just to drive it home, because it's true for not just this chapter. And that's to say that your research question is really your ultimate filter whenever you're asking yourself, should I include this? Shouldn't I include this? So whether that's your literature review chapter, whether it's your methodology chapter, whether it's any chapter, the research question is the filter. That's the method by which you say, is this relevant or isn't it relevant? Now, of course, there's going to be things that are tangentially relevant and there's things that are going to be somewhat tangential. So you need to always go back to this research question, and perhaps you have some sub-research questions, and that's always how you're going to filter this whole thing out. One other point that I'll just throw on for this chapter is you definitely want to have a look also at past dissertations from your institute, from your program. That's again a very generic piece of advice for all chapters. It's useful to get an idea, but you also want to just check, because some universities will have the expectation that your results chapter, your findings chapter, and your discussion chapter are separate. I think that's probably more common. And some will have a requirement that these things get merged. And if that is the expectation, then that really changes sort of how much you speak about. Though it shouldn't really change the focus of what you speak about it, but it affects how you approach it. So definitely just have a look at, if you can get your hands on past dissertations from your institution, that will give you an idea of what does this chapter look like, because it's not quite the same as a journal article. You're going to be digesting a lot of journal articles and you're going to look at their sections, and that's like, it's not a good indicator, right? So you definitely want to do that. Your librarian should be able to help you with that. If not, we do also have a collection of published dissertations in our Grad Coach Research Toolkit. That's a free toolkit that you can download. Again, I'll share the link in the chat there, but that's where you want to be starting.
I think just to reiterate something that Derek alluded to there, if you're doing a combination of the results and discussion chapter, a findings chapter, if you will, that's going to be a very different situation, because there you're going to be presenting your results and then interpreting them and relating it to the literature. And then things get a lot more narrative in how you present the work. But if you're doing a results chapter, it's really important, separate to your discussion, that you just focus on presenting the results in the results section, not interpreting it, not doing any synthesis or insights. You really just want to stick to presenting your data. Just a quick tip on the back end of Derek's statement.
Yeah. And to complexify things further, there's also like multiple different words that get used for this chapter, right? Results, findings, analysis, etc. So again, it really helps to have a look at past dissertations and try to understand what it is that your institution specifically wants. All right, let's jump on to the next question. And this is certainly one that we encounter quite a bit with students that we work with here at Grad Coach. And this has to do with imposter syndrome. So very often we see students coming along, they're thick into their research and they're doing a great job, but they feel like they are complete imposters. They feel like, how can I be making these statements? How can I be presenting this? I'm a rookie in this space. So, David, how can students approach dealing with this imposter syndrome that almost seems part and parcel with academic research, especially at a doctoral level?
So I think Derek's alluded to it with the end of the question there, but it's kind of normal for imposter syndrome to sneak in. By definition, doing research is looking into and figuring out the unknown. And so there's always going to be a point in your journey where you go from having a general idea about the topic to realizing just how much there is to know about the topic and how little you know. And that's completely normal and to be expected. If you didn't feel that way, I'd be concerned. You should have a moment at some point where you feel like, this is so much, who am I to be contributing to this? So first off, I think it's really important to acknowledge and to validate that feeling. You are feeling like there is so much more to this and you might not be up to the task. But the counter to that is that's what you're doing. You're studying a dissertation. You're getting a degree to learn these skills, to develop these approaches. You are learning how to be a researcher. And as part of that journey, you are learning how much you don't know. So that's the first thing that I would say, is just validate those feelings. Don't necessarily ignore them. Don't necessarily discount them, because they're actually a sign that you're making progress in your dissertation and your understanding of the topic. The second thing is, don't go it alone. Find peers, connections, a coach, a mentor, if you would, to talk through your feelings about this, because often enough, they're going to help you identify where your personal blind spots are, where you aren't seeing your wins, where you aren't seeing your knowledge gains. The other thing is, definitely take advantage of your university's resources. Many universities have student support organizations, peer writing groups. Those are going to be great places for you to really just engage with people who are going through the same journey as you. And that's going to help normalize that experience. Again, Imposter syndrome is difficult to experience. I know I've had it multiple times throughout my research journey as well, but it's also really beneficial for helping us to push ourselves forward and to also identify where we don't know enough. I think the other thing that you want to do is think about why you're feeling this imposter syndrome and think about what are the specific aspects that have you feeling concerned that you don't know enough. And then test those assumptions. Check, maybe I think I don't know enough about this topic, but then think about how many papers you've read on it, how many more papers you've read on it than your supervisor has. And those can be ways of sort of challenging those assumptions that are underpinning that imposter syndrome and helping you to really identify what's reasonable that you can work on and what's necessarily unreasonable or an assumption or a blind spot in your case as well.
Great points, David. I think there's always this irony around imposter syndrome, which is those people who are experiencing it, and especially those who are experiencing it most severely, are the ones that really don't need to be worrying about it because they already, the imposter syndrome is a product of your self-awareness that you have these gaps. You have these black boxes that need to be filled in. And if you have that awareness, you're already 10 steps ahead of the person who does it and feels like they're super confident and ready to go. So I always encourage students and even many of the team members at Grad Coach, I encourage this embracing of imposter syndrome because it means that one, you have a self-awareness, and two, it also means that you are operating at the edge of your competence, and that means you're outside of your comfort zone. And if that's not what a degree serves to achieve, then I don't know what it does, right? So it's a sign that you're in the right place. It's never enjoyable, but it doesn't need to be seen as this existential crisis of like, oh my gosh, I'm a complete fraud. I think essentially what it means is I'm very uncomfortable because I'm at the edge of my competence zone, and this is where I grow. So if you can reframe it in that way, then you're winning. Let's jump on to our next question. And this is something that we see come up so often with the students that we work with one-on-one at Grad Coach. So this question is, I'm working full-time and I have a wife and kids. What practical tips can you recommend to help me make consistent progress with my research? David, this is one I'm sure the vast majority of your clients fall into these categories or into this category. This is the classic adult learner scenario. They've got a lot going on. Perhaps they don't have a wife and kids on top of full-time work, or perhaps they have the wife and kids, but they don't have the full-time work, or perhaps they have it all. How can students prioritize? How can they manage the process of undertaking quality, rigorous academic research with all of this on?
So I think first and foremost, it's really important not to sacrifice what's important to you. I think a lot of people get into this mindset of, I've just got to get it done. I'm going to ignore my wife. I'm going to distance myself from my kids. I'm going to lock myself in my office and just disappear until the dissertation's done. That can be helpful in the short term if you really are up against a crunch period. But long term, that's going to affect your mental health, your well-being, and your overall just enjoyment of life and the process. So the first bit of advice I always give to clients in this context is take a sit down, think about what's important to you. What are your values? What are the things that you feel are really important to you in terms of your life balance? And then plan out how you can fit your studies in with that. Maybe studies are top of that list. Maybe studies are bottom of that list. So you're going to have to make space for it. But importantly, you want to think about what is important and how you can balance that. So that's the first thing, just getting an understanding of what you want to engage with and spend your very limited time on. Secondly, get help. Whether that's a peer writing group, university support services, academic coach, grad coach, if you would, it really helps to get support from your supervisor or anyone to help you identify what are the really important steps. What is going to give you the most progress for this point in time in your dissertation? And so getting that second opinion, getting support from others is going to be really beneficial in helping you manage that. The next thing you want to think about is in the context of this question, wife and kids. Have the conversation with your family. Identify what is for you a time slot that you can put towards your research work. Ideally, that would be when you're most productive, if it's not infringing on your day job, but you want to identify what that time is. And then you really want to communicate with your family what you're doing, why you're doing it, and communicating what you need from them, because they're not going to know what they need to do to support you. I know I was a spouse to someone doing a PhD. I was doing my PhD at the same time, so I had a little bit of understanding to that. But really, they don't know what you need. And so if you don't communicate that to them, then you're just leading yourself to potential frustrations and also, not getting the support that you need. The other thing that I can say is going to be exceptionally important when trying to balance everything is effective planning and discipline. So effective planning means identifying what all you need to do. And that's not just the big task. I need to do the literature review. Break it down into smaller tasks. I need to read these 10 papers. I need to make notes on these 10 papers, and then start prioritizing and ordering that in a list, in a spreadsheet, whatever works for you. Some people are visual and have a whiteboard in their office or workspace, but you really want to be figuring out what is going to be the next step that you can take to make the most progress and to minimize wheel spinning and unnecessary time. It's always going to be frustrating if you spend an hour and a half not spending time with your family, with your kids, and then come out of that situation feeling unproductive. At the same time, that is going to happen, so be compassionate with yourself as well. And so really getting support in helping plan that out, whether that's in the writing phase, make use of outlines, build up a skeleton for your dissertation chapter before you go into writing it. Too many people hit that chapter and think, I need to write 10 pages today or 10 pages this week, and then hit a writer's block because they're overwhelmed. If you hit that block, focus on the planning stage and then identify where you can jump within that document as well.
Some great points there. I'm trying to think how I can add to this. I think what you need to appreciate as a sort of a non-standard learner, so let's say you're doing this part-time, you're doing this with other responsibilities in your life, is you really got to focus on being as efficient and effective as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So are two really generic terms, so let me try and make that a little bit more tangible. Efficiency, there's many ways that you can be more efficient in terms of, say, structuring your day, because some of the things that David's touched on. But going back to the root cause, this can even play into your topic ideation in the early stages of your research. So there are certainly, when you're faced with a range of topics that you can explore, there's going to be ones that are going to be easier and ones that are going to be harder in terms of data collection, in terms of data analysis. There's going to be data that's easier for you to get. There's going to be data that's easier for you to analyze. And by this, I mean, perhaps you're more of a quant person, perhaps you're more of a poll person, perhaps you have access to a certain group of people within your employment environment, et cetera, et cetera. So you really want to think in the early stages. If you are at the early stages, you want to be thinking about what resources and strengths do I have? How can I play to those strengths and to that set of resources by choosing a topic that's going to allow me to move through this thing as quickly as possible? Because research and the dissertation process is hard enough on its own. You don't want also all of the practical components to drag you down as well. So you want to be thinking about, okay, how can I be as efficient as possible with my topic choice, with my methodology choices, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it comes to being effective, this means that, okay, so you've locked down some time, maybe that's early morning, maybe that's late night, whatever the case may be. You've hopefully managed to eliminate all the distractions, the external distractions in that time block. So that's the kids are in bed, the wife is away, whatever the case may be. Maybe you're working in the office early in the morning. You got rid of all those external distractions. But then very often what students are really, really actually fighting is the internal distraction, is the efficiency or the inability to sit down and focus and just get work done. So there's no easy solution here, but one of the simplest techniques that I always find useful, and this is not specific to a dissertation or a thesis or a specific type of work, but it's just the Pomodoro technique. So it's literally setting a timer on your phone for 25 minutes. And the deal with yourself is I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do what I need to do for the next 25 minutes until that alarm goes off. And then I'm going to reward myself with a 5-minute break. And then I'm going to do that again. And just having that structure where you're kind of policing yourself, it's incredibly effective. And very often students find that actually that's just a change to how they approach sitting down and writing really makes a difference, as opposed to all of these other things, that all these external variables that they were trying to control for. And that's both terrifying news and good news, because it means that you don't need to change all of these external circumstances. You don't need to renegotiate your employment arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. You just need to be better at sitting down and doing stuff when you have the time to do it. So just some ramblings there, and hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think one thing that you can also do to help build that productivity is sort of celebrate the wins, celebrate the successes when you get those small bits of progress. And the reason for this is, yes, it builds up some self-confidence, it builds up some motivation. But what you're also doing when you're celebrating those wins is you are giving yourself some dopamine. And that's going to really help you to get more comfortable in those spaces. You're training your brain to enjoy doing those tasks. So don't necessarily focus just purely on that end goal, but break it down into tasks, identify when you've succeeded at the task, and then celebrate. And I think that's also why the Pomodoro technique is so beneficial, because you're sitting down to work for 25 minutes, but there is a celebration afterwards. There's a little bit of a break. And some people will use that to dive into the next session, but it's always going to be beneficial to give yourself a little bit of compassion and grace in your experience.
And some snacks. The brain burns calories real fast when you're working on this stuff. So that's a story I tell myself, at least. All right, let's jump into another interesting question. And this question speaks to the very end stages of a dissertation, but it can apply throughout. And the question is, with regards to the viva voce, the oral defense, as it's called, what are some of the most common questions and how should I go about handling them? Now, this generally applies to doctoral level research, and it doesn't necessarily apply to all doctoral degrees. But I think this question is great because these are questions that you should be asking yourself throughout the research process, regardless of whether you're writing an undergraduate, postgraduate, master's, doctoral, whatever the level of degree is that you're preparing research for. The types of questions that come up in an oral defense, the types of questions you should have been asking yourself along the way. So, David, let's dig into that. What are some of the common and some of the key questions that come up in the oral defense stage?
So I think first and foremost, I will say we've actually got a resource on this. We've got a video, if I'm not mistaken, and an article, which I'll make sure we include as a resource after the session as well. So I won't necessarily cover all the questions that you're going to be asked, because there are a ton of them. And really what it comes down to, though, is your reviewers, your board that's assessing you, they're not trying to fail you. They're just trying to make sure that you understand what you did and that it's clear that you did the work as well. They're looking to help you out. And so first, a bit of advice before I jump into the questions: don't rush answering questions when they're asked. Take your time to think about what they've asked. Rephrase the question to them. I always used to, in my defenses, say, if I understand correctly, you're asking X, right? And that gives you time to make sure you've understood it correctly, but also time to think about your answer as well. And then take your time answering the question. Don't rush it. And I'll use that as a segue into some common questions. And I think probably the most important or the most common question is, tell me about what you researched and why. So really what they're trying to get at here is they want to understand your elevator pitch for your research. Why did you choose this topic? What was the research gap you wanted to address? What did you want to achieve with your research, and how did you go about doing it? Sort of their big question to ask near the start to just get an idea and get you comfortable with your research. In terms of prepping for that, you want to prep an answer for that, not word for word memorized, but you want to know what are the key points in your research journey. What is my topic? What is my research gap? What was my methodology? What was my key findings? And what does it mean, right? The second common question that comes up is, what did you find? And sometimes you'll touch on this in the previous answer, sometimes you won't, but here they're really just trying to say, what did you find in relation to your research questions? So again, tying back to our earlier comment, we want to always answer that question in relation to our research questions. We want to make sure that we're clearly saying this is what we set out to do, and this is what we found. And this is something you should be very comfortable with by the end of the dissertation journey. So don't get stressed about this question. They're not trying to catch you out or anything. They're really just trying to get an idea of what you did. What the next question is, that is where they're trying to catch you out a little bit. This is where they're digging into where you are and how much you thought about your research. What was an unexpected finding, or what was an unexpected occurrence in your dissertation? Here, they're less interested about your research and more about what you experienced and how you moved through that as well. So you can prep for this question, identify what was unexpected, whether it was something with your methodology, whether it was a finding that you expected to be significant and it was not significant, or maybe it was a theme in your qualitative analysis that came completely out of the blue. You want to know what those unexpected results are and have put a little bit of thought into how you would tackle that question as well. So why did you find what you found? Why did you struggle with that aspect in the methodology? They're really just trying to see how critically you are engaging with your own project and whether you understand what was expected versus unexpected in your findings. I think another question that is super common, and you're almost guaranteed to get this question or some iteration of this, is what would you do differently in the future, or what should future researchers do based on your findings? Here, they're really trying to test your researcher chops. Are you able to identify the shortcomings in your study and propose solutions? Are you able to identify interesting findings from your study that could be developed into future research? And you want to make sure that you're being creative in your answers, but also being feasible and reasonable. They're not necessarily looking for an answer to the question like, I would just throw X more at it and get a much larger sample. They're really looking to see what you could do to really take your study to the next level. They're not asking you to do that as well. They're just trying to get an idea of your context and your exposure. So those are a few examples. There are a few others out there that I'm sure are on that resource that we've provided. But again, I just want to reiterate, in the defense, yes, they're marking you. Yes, they're assessing you. But most of the time, unless they're reviewer number 2, they're not out to get you. And so you should be comfortable with the idea that they're going to be asking you questions about your research and be comfortable knowing what you did in your research as well.
Great points, David. One that I'd add to that, and just by the way, I have dropped the link for the video that David and I did years back, where we cover, I think, 9 common questions. So be sure to check that out.
No.
One that I would add to that is make sure that you're very aware of the limitations of your research. This is a question that will often come up, and it's a question that students tend to shy away from because it's perceived incorrectly as weaknesses, and that's not quite the right way to frame it. Every research project is going to have limitations. Even the most well-funded research projects have limitations. So naturally a small doctoral dissertation, self-funded scenario, you're going to have limitations in your research. And so this is not something to shy away from. You want to be very critical of those, obviously not at the cost of throwing away your research and saying my research is worth nothing, but being aware of what the sort of parameters are in terms of what you can claim from your findings. Excuse this terrible voice. And being aware of your study's limitations. You want to be able to speak about those confidently. You want to be able to speak about how those could be done better in future research, because this essentially creates opportunities for future research. And I guess this also sort of feeds into what you were speaking about earlier, David, about what would you have liked to have done better, or what would you like to change about your research. What the examiners want to see is that, one, you have the self-awareness, this critical awareness where your research falls short, and two, that you have some ideas about how that could be improved upon by other researchers or by yourself in the future. So keep in mind that the whole purpose of a dissertation is to be able to demonstrate your research skills, your competency in research. And so being able to identify the limitations of any study, whether it's yours or a study in your literature review, that's really important. So you want to just make sure that you're ready for that. Don't be sticking your head in the sand, kind of hoping that it won't come up. You want to be ready. You want to be ready to fire some rounds at your research in a diplomatic way. Let's put it that way.
I think one thing that I would add as well, if you really want to wow your examiners, prep for these common questions. And towards the end of your presentation, or when they ask the questions, have some slides prepped at the end of your document. When they ask about that unexpected finding, throw up the slide about that unexpected finding. That really demonstrates to your examiners that you've thought deeply about your research, that you've been critical, that you've engaged. So don't necessarily do it for all the questions, but if there's a question that you expect you're going to be asked, prep for it. Worst case scenario, they don't ask the question. Best case scenario, you wow their socks off with your preparation. And so that's always going to be beneficial as well.
100%. All right, we are running up against the clock here, but we have had a question come in, and I think this is a question that comes in every Q&A session we have, and that is with regards to AI in research. So, generic question: what are your thoughts on AI in research? How should students think about this, David? Probably the hottest topic in research right now, and certainly the one that there's no firm, solid, generic answer to.
No, there is no firm, solid, generic answer. And the first thing that I'll say is, it doesn't matter what my thoughts are about AI. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are about AI. What matters is what your institution's thoughts and current stance is on AI, because you don't want to be caught on the wrong side of that stance. So that's always the first thing I mention to any clients, any students I talk to. Know your institution and their current AI policy, because you don't want to be caught on the wrong side of that. Worst case scenario, you can be disbanded from ever doing that degree again, and you don't want that to happen. So that's just the obligatory disclaimer out the way. Check with your institution. My personal view on AI is it is a great tool when used appropriately. So it's not necessarily good to use it to do your writing. That is going to be cheapening your experience, your learning, your development of your coverage. Where it is helpful, though, is for throwing ideas back and forth, challenging your views, finding out what there are other options, and for basic administrative tasks or things that you need the high level point of view on. But if you are engaging with AI to get some insights, get perspectives, you want to make sure that you are grounding those thoughts, if you are working them into your literature, into your research, based on previous research. And we've all heard about AI hallucinations. We also know that large language models are based on the entirety of the internet up to a certain stage. And so if you don't use the AI appropriately, it's going to give you what you want to hear as well. So I think another important thing is, if you are using AI, look into prompt engineering. Do a short course on that. There are a ton of free resources out there about that, but learn how to effectively use AI in research. I think the Other thing that I might mention is don't necessarily trust AI to find references for you. I've had some horror stories from previous clients in the past who've used ChatGPT at the time to help them find references, and then those references did not exist. It provided them with a reference, provided them with a DOI, it provided them with a link even to the paper. But when you follow up, you find out that that paper doesn't exist. And it's the perfect paper. It's got the right title that exactly addresses the concept that you are. So always be careful in your use of AI. I'm sure Derek also has some thoughts on this as well. We've chatted about it a lot in previous AMAs and with clients as well.
Yeah, I think your first point is really the most important one, is that when it comes to AI, the very first question you need to be answering with tremendous confidence is, what does my university think? What does my institution think? Because you don't want to cross a line there and get into trouble. Some universities are incredibly forward-looking on this stuff, and they're not only are they accepting AI, they're embracing it, and they're teaching prompt engineering, as you've mentioned. Some universities are on the exact other end of the spectrum, and you need to know where you stand in that respect. And certainly, from our perspective, we're really pro-technology. We're always looking at, okay, how can we help students work as efficiently and effectively as possible? This ties back to what we spoke about earlier, especially adult learners that have a lot of other stuff going on. But something that you just always need to keep in mind is that research, and especially research for doctoral level projects, is a necessarily immersive task. In other words, you do need to spend the time immersing yourself in the literature, understanding who said what, understanding the arguments that have been raging for the last few decades, or perhaps not that long, depending on what your topic is. And so that immersion component does require a time investment, and there's no way to get around that. The AI tools can help you fast track getting to papers, perhaps summarizing papers, etc. But ultimately, you still got to immerse yourself in it. You've still got to do the thinking. You've still got to understand, how does what this person's saying relate to what that person's saying, the whole synthesis component. Again, AI can do some of that, but it's doing that because it's immersed itself in the literature, and now it's giving you the summary. So by you reading the summary, you're just getting that superficial level understanding. You're not getting the immersion. So there are limitations to all of this, and I think we're in a really interesting space. But as David said, it doesn't matter what I think or what he thinks or what you think. What really matters is understand where your university stands with all of that stuff. So on that note, we are going to have to wrap it up here. As mentioned, you certainly, if you have more questions, you're welcome to book a pre-consultation with any of our coaches. There's a short link there. There's a QR code that you can scan to get access to our direct calendar, or you can just visit the website, growcoach.com. Then, last but not least, of course, for those of you who want to access the research blueprints, the blueprints are our mini courses. They're generally priced at $250 each. You can grab all of them, so it's $1,000 worth of value, using this link right here. That is only available for the next 2 hours, so I'll leave that on screen for a little bit. Visit that link. You just need to enter your name and email, and then it will register you and enroll you into all 4 of those courses. Lifetime access, use them as you wish. And that's just a little thank you for joining us today. So on that note, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for putting up with my terrible fluey voice, but hopefully David has managed to communicate a lot more value than I have today. So thank you all for joining. And we've got another one of these scheduled for, I think, the 21st of the month. We'll send out a mailer. It'd be great if you could join us there. We're also going to consider narrowing the focus of these into different areas. So we might do a literature review Q&A, we might do a research proposal Q&A. So feel free to send us your feedback on that as well if you think that's a good idea. But for now, thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you in the next week or two.
Cheers, everyone.